Dragon Riders, Kaze no Kaeru, by Night Dragon 0. Serak's perspective. The M4A1 violently vibrated in my hands as I put a number of holes in the last guard behind us. Satisfied that we wouldn't be attacked from behind for a while, I ran forward to see how Dracia was managing. To put it simply, she was kicking ass. She had either not been scratched a bit, or had decided not to show any signs of pain from her wounds, and I had to put strong preference on the latter. The pile of unconscious Marowak, dazed Kangaskhan, and the numerous dead and dying human soldiers around were enough to prove the extent of the Dragonite's rage. Dracia's current battle was a wrestling match with a gigantic Tyranitar. Despite her frenzied rage, the Tyranitar still looked like it was winning. Dracia changed her battle plan and leaned backwards, throwing her opponent's huge mass over her heels. Roaring, it pulled itself up and let off a bright white hyper beam. Dracia gracefully somersaulted over it and brought her entire weight down on the back of its head. The combination of her motion and her mass easily brought her opponent down. I heard the dull crack as the opponent's skull was crushed under the excessive force used. "Hey, take it easy," I said, running up beside her. Dracia was panting and covered with perspiration, but refused to answer me. While waiting for her to recover, I scanned the area and my eyes fell upon a sign further down the corridor. "Weapons storeroom," I read, walking over to the door beside it. It was locked, but there was a panel with 3 buttons on it. Just 3 buttons? Jeez, these people are either very stupid or extremely overconfident. I tried pushing a combination of the 3 buttons. A buzzer suddenly sounded, startling me. "Fuck you! We need more lumber, asshole!" a squeaky voice blared from the speaker on the door. "Huh?" I gawked. "Wrong number then." Dracia walked over and smashed the control panel with her fist. That had both the effect of stopping the music and opening the door. "Thanks." Dracia gave a slight nod as I stepped through. It was pretty small, hardly larger than a broom closet. Most of the guns were either broken or didn't look in very good condition. However, one caught my attention. Wow! It took a lot of strength to lift the Nikita rocket launcher onto my shoulder. What a beauty! I walked out and showed it to Dracia. "Careful, that thing has auto-firing," she warned. "How do you know?" I asked. "Because your finger just moved the switch marked auto-fire." "Huh? Oh shit!" I was thrown to the ground by the force of the rocket firing. Dracia dropped to the floor and covered her head as another rocket went off. With a rather pissed look, she pointed in the direction away from herself. "I'm sorry," I said. Dracia gave me a look. "Anyway, here." She tossed me a box of rockets from the storeroom. "I'll try not to pull another stunt like that." I laughed as I loaded the weapon. The sounds of gunfire caught our attention. "There." Dracia pointed her head at the source of the noise. Firestorm's perspective. "Damn, we're pinned!" I yelled, still taking over behind the corners. "Thanks for stating the obvious," Jade yelled. "You're welcome!" The robot with the Gatling gun was still firing, making me wonder how much ammo they had to waste. "Take that!" Serak's voice sounded. It was followed by a deafening blast, which promptly stopped the gunfire. I peered out to see its weapon had been destroyed. Having approached by a corridor at the robot's side, Serak and Dracia stepped into view, waving at us in triumph. A Nikita launcher was on the floor beside them. "Damn!" Dylan growled. "Fall back now!" The robot hesitated for a moment as if contemplating his order. Then it dropped down onto its back. "It's so hard to build good help these days," Dylan sighed, slapping his head. "Jade! Urgus! Now!" I cried. "Mega Quake!" Utilizing the Earth-based sacred technique, I slammed my fist onto the ground, creating a tremor which sent Dylan stumbling and the robot bouncing into the air. Urgus took a cue and gave it a thunderbolt while it was in midair. The robot hit the floor hard, sending small bits and pieces of it flying off. Its circulatory groaned in protest as it struggled to get into a kneeling position, and that was just in time to see Jade and me with the finale. X-Strike! Jade's flames wrapped themselves around my claws while I was in mid-charge. With the added speed of my quick attack, the impact's power and the flames combined to generate a small explosion, taking off the robot's head and most of its upper body. "Useless machine," Dylan muttered, climbing to his feet. "This isn't over yet!" The sub-commander fired several shots at us, causing us to dive for cover before making a break for the nearest door. However, something else stopped him before he got there. A blue sphere of energy smacked him dead on, sending him flying all the way across the corridor. Jade, Urgus, and I dropped to the ground. Dylan's body hit the wall with an ear-splitting crunch. It didn't take much for us to realize that he was dead. "Look there!" Serak pointed. Standing by the opposite side was a strange Pokemon. It resembled a purple humanoid with feline-like features. It still had its 3-fingered hands raised, and I realized that it was the one who just killed the SF sub-commander. "Be wary, this was not the true threat," her telepathic voice told us. Somehow, it didn't surprise me that it was a Psychic-type Pokemon. "Who are you?" I demanded, still wary of the figure. "I am not your enemy," she replied. "I am Cindrea. I believe I would be known as Mewtwo. But let me ask you this, Firestorm. Can you feel its power?" "What's power?" I asked, confused. "That you will know for yourself. Follow me if your instincts tell you to." In a flash of blue light, she was gone. "What was that about?" Jade wondered. "I don't really know. However, I do feel something," I said, closing my eyes. "My psychic powers aren't really developed yet. I don't know how to explain it, but it's feeling like something cold and dark." "And what about her?" Serac jerked a thumb towards the position Cindrea had stood on. "She left something like a psychic trail, and I say we follow," I told the others. "I have a feeling she's leading us right to where we want to be." "Incoming!" Urges warned, spotting a Feraligatr charging round the corner. Immediately, I faced our new opponent, yellow energy flashing around my body as I charged up my lightning-based sacred skills. "Integration!" Chris's perspective. "Jeez, this place is a hellhole!" I shouted. Fires were everywhere, and it wasn't hard to see why the basement level was practically abandoned. Azure lowered his twin cannons and did his best to clear the fires out of the path. Ashura wasn't taking the heat much better than myself, but he contributed his razor leaves to clearing small pieces of debris. I led the way, counting the room numbers on the doors. "Nice to see you again, Chris," Ashura said as we ran. "You may be a little different on the outside, but you're still the same within." That pretty much shocked me into stopping and turning back to face them. The 2 first Pokemon I'd ever had. It really pricked my conscience that I'd forgotten all this while. "You've grown a lot, both of you," I replied. "I just wish I could say the same about myself." "We're still here for you. Whatever you may have done, it's just great to have you back," Azure added in. "Yeah," Ashura nodded. "Thanks, guys." I was truly touched. An explosion from a nearby door drew us back to our perilous reality, getting the 3 of us running again. "Which room again?" Azure asked. 27, I panted. "Here!" I kicked the door inwards, only to be greeted by waves of blinding flames in my path. "This doesn't look good," Ashura exclaimed. Although I had to admit that he was right, I had to at least try to find my child. "Azure!" "Gotcha!" The Blastoise nodded, unleashing his hydro pump upon the flames. "Just wait out here for me, and try to keep the water coming," I instructed. Both Pokemon nodded and watched me intently. Every instinct in my Scyther body was screaming, "Get away from the flames!" But what pushed me on was my human side, a part of myself I'd lost touch with for so long. With a roar, I plunged into the flames. I very nearly regretted it, but I shielded my eyes with a claw and glanced around. Azure's spray of water was consistent and cooling, but also made it harder to see, with added difficulty from the smoke and steam from the fire. I chose to rely on my beast instincts and let out a series of calls. They were more like growls meant to alert any other Scyther in the area. At first there was nothing. I was about to give up when I got a faint response. I caught a flicker of movement towards the back of the room. It took every ounce of my courage to defy my instincts and leap through the flames. There, I finally saw the hatchling, a baby Scyther, barely even up to my knee. He was huddled up in the corner of the room, behind a cage and some fallen metal slabs. I don't know if it's some parental instinct to know your children, but whatever it was, I knew that he was my child. "Here! Come on!" I called, running closer. The hatchling was terrified, and instead backed away, further into the corner where I couldn't reach him. "Come on!" I pleaded, sticking my claw out as far as I could. "Please!" In those tense few seconds, as I silently pleaded, cursed, and simply prayed, finally he began moving towards me. "Yes, that's right." I put on the best smile I could. "Just a little more." He was almost within reach. Then, fate intervened. The explosion was so close it temporarily deafened me. I screamed in anguish, whether for myself or my child, I didn't know. I was lying on the ground, partially conscious, too stunned to move, to save myself. I was sure it was the end for me, but then I heard the voices. "Chris!" It was Ashura. "Bro, we gotta get in there!" "Trying, but my water supplies are almost out." "Whatever it is, we have to get her out of there." I couldn't catch much after that, but I was briefly aware of myself being lifted and carried around through the flames. I could hear screams and coughing, but my mind refused to work. Can't hold on! Just a little more, Ashura. Just as long as she's alright. When I finally came to, I found myself back at the top of the stairway we'd come down, and I felt like I'd walked through the burning pits of hell and back. However, that was when I noticed the two figures sprawled on the floor on either side of me. Ashura! Azure! No! Both the Ivysaur and Blastoise were badly burnt, practically charred in some places, and bleeding all over. God knows what they went through to get me out of there. Please wake up! I begged, shaking each of them as lightly as I could. At least we got to see you one last time, Chris, Ashura moaned weakly. We always said we'd look after you, just like old times, Azure followed up. Don't try to talk, I cried, although I knew what was coming. Don't worry about us. Ashura looked up towards me and managed a weak grin. As long as you remember. Azure closed his eyes. Ashura immediately joined him. I was left standing there in a complete state of numbness. My Scyther body roared with all its might. The roar of anguish seemed to re-energize my body. I'd failed myself. I'd failed Wayne and Scantrix. I'd failed my child. I'd failed Ashura and Azure. I slammed the ground over and over again until I managed to get a hold of myself. I had to stop this. I had to start believing in myself again. With a new spur of energy, I bade my fallen comrades a silent farewell before breaking into a sprint.